Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Ohio. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing to what places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. Summer had just taken hold over Greene County, Ohio, when the old Litchfield property finally went up for auction in June of 1903. The estate, once the pride of Zonaya Township, had stood abandoned for nearly 2 years following the disappearance of its last occupant, a reclusive man named Edmund Litchfield. The county records office had declared him legally deceased the previous winter, though no remains were ever found. According to documents recovered from the County Historical Society, the auction drew minimal interest. Most locals refused to even step foot on the property, citing an unnatural chill that seemed to linger around the house regardless of the summer heat. Only 3 potential buyers showed interest that day: a land developer from Cincinnati, a widow from Columbus, and Thomas Hargrove, a professor of American history at the regional college who had developed a peculiar fascination with the Litchfield lineage. Hargrove's notebooks, discovered decades later in the university archives, describe the 3-story Victorian home as majestic yet foreboding, with steep gables that seemed to pierce the sky like accusing fingers. The professor noted peculiar architectural choices: windows positioned at irregular heights, doorways that seemed narrower on one side than the other, and a curious absence of mirrors throughout the home. Most notably, however, was the unusual layout of the 3rd floor, which contained a single room that spanned the entire level, a chamber that had been sealed shut with heavy oak planks nailed across its entrance. "The auctioneer seemed visibly relieved when I placed my bid," wrote Hargrove in his journal entry dated June 18, 1903. "No one else contested it, despite my offer being well below the property's assessed value. When I inquired about the sealed room, he merely shook his head and said, 'The county doesn't recommend opening that space, sir, but we can't legally prevent you from doing so. The deed is yours now, along with whatever waits beyond those boards.'" What Hargrove discovered in that sealed chamber would lead him down a path of obsessive research into one of the most disturbing family histories ever documented in the state of Ohio. His methodical investigation, spanning 8 years, pieced together a narrative so unsettling that upon presenting his findings to the College Board in 1911, he was promptly dismissed from his position and his research confiscated, only to resurface decades later in a forgotten archive during a library renovation. The Litchfield family first arrived in Greene County in 1851. Jeremiah Litchfield, a successful merchant from Boston, relocated his family to Ohio, following what public records vaguely describe as unfortunate incidents in Massachusetts. Accompanying him were his wife Margaret, their 4 children, Abigail, William, Edmund, and young Thomas, and an unusually large collection of locked trunks that required a separate wagon to transport. County records show that Jeremiah purchased nearly 60 acres of land outside Zonaya, where he promptly began construction of what would become known locally as Litchfield Manor. Unusually, Jeremiah employed no local workers for the project, instead bringing in laborers from as far away as Pennsylvania and New York. These men lived in tents on the property during construction, and, according to an account published in the local newspaper, departed immediately upon the home's completion, refusing to accept final payment in person. Instead, they requested that their wages be sent to them after they had crossed the state line. The workers spoke of unusual requests made by Mr. Litchfield, reported the local newspaper in December 1852, the most peculiar being his insistence on building a room with no windows, accessible only by a single door at the top of the house. When questioned by neighbors about this architectural oddity, Jeremiah would only say that some things must be kept away from the light. The Litchfields quickly established themselves as a family of means and education, but they remained notably distant from the community. Their children did not attend the local school, instead receiving private tutoring at home. The family rarely attended local gatherings and never hosted visitors in their home. The only exception was Jeremiah, who would occasionally appear in town for business matters, though locals noted he never extended invitations to the manor. Margaret Litchfield was seldom seen at all. The few accounts of her describe a pale, thin woman who spoke in whispers and whose hands trembled constantly. According to the diary of a neighbor, Esther Williams, Margaret was once observed collecting soil from the local cemetery at dawn, filling small cloth pouches with dirt from the oldest graves. When approached, she reportedly startled like a deer before a hunter's rifle, before fleeing back to the family home. The Litchfield children were similarly elusive. Abigail, the eldest daughter, was occasionally glimpsed tending to a peculiar garden behind the house, plants that, according to local accounts, bore no flowers or fruit, but were meticulously maintained nonetheless. William, the oldest son, would sometimes accompany his father to town, standing silently behind him during transactions, his eyes rarely blinking. Edmund was known only through his father's occasional references to his delicate constitution, which apparently prevented him from leaving the house. The youngest, Thomas, was so rarely seen that rumors circulated he might not exist at all. The Litchfields cast no shadow on this community, wrote Reverend James Hollister in his private correspondence dated 1855. They exist alongside us, but never among us. There is something in their silence that troubles me more than any shouted profanity ever could. For nearly a decade the family continued in this manner, present yet separate, wealthy yet uninvolved. Then, in the winter of 1860, the first of many tragedies struck the household. According to county death records, young Thomas Litchfield passed away at the age of 12 from what was listed only as natural causes. No funeral was held. No announcement appeared in the local paper. The boy was buried on the family property in a small ceremony attended only by immediate family. It was following Thomas's death that locals began to notice changes in the Litchfield home. Black drapes appeared in every window, remaining drawn regardless of the time of day. The sounds of footsteps were reported on the third floor at all hours of the night, pacing in endless circles. Most troubling, however, were the accounts from the nearest neighbors who claimed to hear a child's laughter coming from the property, despite the fact that the only child young enough to laugh so innocently was now buried beneath the cold Ohio soil. Professor Hargrove's investigation reveals that within the next 5 years, the Litchfield family would lose 2 more members. Margaret Litchfield was found dead in the spring of 1862, her body discovered in the garden behind the house. The cause of death was listed as apoplexy, though the doctor's private notes, uncovered by Hargrove decades later, mentioned unusual markings around her neck and a rigidity to her features suggesting extreme terror at the moment of expiration. Abigail followed her mother just 3 years later. According to the sole account from a housemaid who briefly worked for the family, Abigail had taken to sleeping in the attic room, claiming that something in her regular bedroom whispered to her all night. She was found unresponsive one morning in 1865, her body positioned precisely in the center of the windowless third-floor chamber, arms and legs extended as if reaching for the 4 corners of the room. The official cause of death was recorded as heart failure, though the same physician who examined her mother noted privately that her eyes appeared to have ruptured from within, as if she had seen something beyond human endurance. Jeremiah and his 2 remaining sons, William and Edmund, continued to occupy the house, though their appearances in town grew even less frequent. The property fell into visible disrepair. The once meticulous gardens overgrew, and paint peeled from the exterior walls. The only part of the home that seemed to receive any care was the family cemetery plot, which, according to land surveys from the time, grew to include 2 more unmarked graves between 1867 and 1870, despite no officially recorded deaths in the family during this period. In 1871, Jeremiah Litchfield himself passed away. The circumstances of his death remain unclear, as no medical examination was performed. William, now head of the household, simply appeared at the county office to register his father's death, listing the cause as old age despite Jeremiah being only 54. When asked about funeral arrangements, William reportedly stated, "He is already where he belongs," before departing without further explanation. It was after Jeremiah's passing that the truly disturbing chapter of the Litchfield history began, one that would not come to light until Professor Hargrove began his investigation 3 decades later. Following his purchase of the property, Hargrove's first action was to remove the board sealing the third-floor chamber. What he found there would set him on his years-long investigation. The room was utterly empty, Hargrove wrote, save for a circle drawn on the wooden floor in what appeared to be red clay. The circle contained strange symbols I could not identify, though they seemed vaguely familiar, as if seen once in a childhood nightmare and never quite forgotten. Most disturbing, however, was the fact that despite the room being sealed for years, there was not a speck of dust within the circle. I placed my hand near it and felt an unmistakable chill, as if the air itself retreated from my touch. Beneath the floorboards of this room, Hargrove discovered a hidden compartment containing what he described as the true archive of the Litchfield legacy, a collection of journals, letters, and documents that had been carefully concealed from public view. Among these was William Litchfield's personal diary, which provided the most comprehensive account of the family's disturbing practices. According to William's writings, the Litchfields had not left Massachusetts by choice, but had fled following the discovery of Jeremiah's unorthodox research. A respected merchant by day, Jeremiah had apparently developed an obsession with what he called the science of spiritual transference, a belief that human consciousness could be preserved beyond death through specific rituals. "Father believes he has found the doorway," William wrote in an entry dated October 1849. He says the ancient texts speak of vessels that can hold the essence of a person even after the body fails. He has begun experimenting with small animals. Mother weeps when she finds them, but Father insists his work will ensure our family never truly knows separation. The diary goes on to describe how Jeremiah's experiments escalated following the family's relocation to Ohio. The specially constructed third-floor room, which William referred to only as the chamber, was designed specifically for these rituals. The sealed space, free from external influence, was where Jeremiah conducted what he called the work of continuation. Most disturbing were William's descriptions of what happened after young Thomas fell ill in 1860. According to the diary, Thomas did not die of natural causes as recorded. Rather, as the boy lay near death from pneumonia, Jeremiah performed a ritual in the chamber, attempting to transfer his son's consciousness into a specially prepared vessel, in this case, a porcelain doll crafted to resemble the child. "Father worked through the night," wrote William. "The screaming was unbearable, not from Thomas, who had fallen silent hours before, but from something else, something that seemed to come from within the very walls. When morning came, Thomas's body was cold, but Father emerged from the chamber, clutching the doll to his chest, insisting that Thomas was still with us. 'He is here,' Father kept saying. 'I can hear him whispering.' The ritual had apparently failed, at least partially. While Thomas did not continue as Jeremiah had hoped, William's subsequent entries suggest something had indeed happened in that room. The family began to experience inexplicable phenomena, objects moving without being touched, the sounds of footsteps when no one was present, and most disturbingly, the distinct laughter of a child echoing through the house at night. Abigail insists she can see Thomas sometimes, William wrote in 1861. She says he stands at the foot of her bed at night, watching her with eyes that never blink. Mother refuses to speak of it, but I've noticed she leaves small toys in the corners of rooms, as if providing offerings to an unseen presence. The diary suggests that the strain of these events took its toll on Margaret Litchfield. In the weeks before her death, she had become increasingly agitated, claiming that something was growing stronger within the house. According to William, on the morning of her death, Margaret had attempted to burn the chamber, carrying a lamp oil and matches to the third floor. She was apparently intercepted by Jeremiah, and though William's account stops short of direct accusation, the implication is clear that her death was not from natural causes, as officially recorded. Father says Mother has joined Thomas now, reads a chilling entry from April 1862. He spends his nights in the chamber, speaking to them both. Sometimes I hear him crying, other times laughing. This morning he told me and Edmund that he has refined the process. When the time comes, he said, you'll never have to leave us. As Hargrove continued to piece together the Litchfield story from these hidden documents, he discovered that Abigail's death 3 years later was also linked to Jeremiah's experiments. William's diary describes how Abigail had become increasingly drawn to the chamber, claiming she could hear her mother and brother calling to her from within. On the night of her death, she apparently entered the room of her own accord, locking the door behind her. We heard the screaming just after midnight, William wrote. Father forbade us from opening the door, insisting that Abigail was crossing over and must not be disturbed. By morning, when we finally entered, she was gone, or at least the sister I knew was gone. Father collected something from the center of the circle, wrapping it carefully in black cloth before placing it in a specially prepared box. Abigail is with us still, he assured me, though Edmund wept uncontrollably beside me. They are all with us now. The specially prepared boxes, referenced throughout William's diary, became a focal point of Hargrove's investigation. According to the professor's notes, he searched the entire property for these containers, but found nothing until examining the family cemetery plot behind the house. There, beneath each gravestone, he discovered not coffins, but small metal boxes, each containing what he described only as items of personal significance to the deceased, altered in ways I cannot bring myself to describe in detail. After Abigail's death, William's diary entries suggest that Jeremiah's obsession deepened. The merchant rarely left the house, instead spending his days in the family library, with ancient texts he had acquired from undisclosed sources. William described his father as withering physically, even as his fervor grows, noting that Jeremiah had taken to scratching strange symbols into the door frames of every room. Father has begun to prepare us, reads an entry from January 1870. He says his own time grows short, but that he has perfected the method at last. Edmund is eager. He has always been the most susceptible to Father's teachings. I find myself unable to share their enthusiasm. Whatever visited us after Thomas's passing is not my brother. Whatever speaks with Abigail's voice from the corners of the house at night is not my sister. I have begun to wonder if Father's work does not preserve life, but rather invites something else entirely to take its place. The unmarked graves that appeared on the property during this period are explained in William's later entries. According to his account, Jeremiah had begun to bring subjects to the house, individuals described only as drifters, or those who would not be missed. These people were apparently housed in the cellar before being taken to the chamber for what Jeremiah called preliminary trials. Father insists these final tests are necessary, William wrote in June 1870. He says he must ensure the process is perfected before attempting it on family. I cannot bear the sounds that come from the chamber on these nights. Edmund assists him willingly, but I have taken to walking into town during these sessions, returning only after dawn when the house falls silent again. I found myself standing outside the sheriff's office yesterday but could not bring myself to enter. What would I say? Who would believe me? And worse, what if they did believe and came to investigate? What would emerge from our house to greet them? When Jeremiah finally passed away in 1871, William's diary suggests it was not from natural causes as officially recorded. According to his entry from October of that year, Jeremiah had determined that his great work was ready for its ultimate expression. Father gathered Edmund and me in the chamber last night, William wrote. The circle had been redrawn, larger than before, and at its center sat 3 objects: a silver pocket watch that had belonged to Thomas, a hairbrush that had been Mother's, and a ribbon that Abigail had worn. Father explained that he would join them now, and that his consciousness would live on within the house itself. "I shall become the guardian of our legacy," he told us, "watching over you until you too are ready to join us in continuation." The diary does not explicitly describe what happened next, but William's frantic handwriting suggests a scene of horror. The screaming began as it always does, but this time it did not stop with dawn. The walls themselves seemed to pulse. The floorboards bent and creaked, as if breathing. When it was over, Father lay in the center of the circle, his eyes open but seeing nothing of this world. Edmund wept tears of joy, but all I could feel was dread. I registered the death as natural causes. What else could I have said? Following Jeremiah's death, the dynamic between the two remaining brothers apparently deteriorated rapidly. Edmund, fully committed to their father's work, took control of the chamber and continued the experiments. William, increasingly disturbed by the family practices, began to distance himself, spending more time in town and even considering leaving Ohio entirely. "Edmund accused me of betrayal tonight," reads an entry from February 1872. "He says I am denying our family's greatest achievement. They are all here with us," he insisted, gesturing to the empty corners of the room. "Can you not hear them speaking?" I admitted I could not, which sent him into a rage. He claims I have closed myself off, that I lack the sensitivity required for the gift of continuation. Perhaps he is right. Perhaps I am the broken one, or perhaps I am the only one who sees our family's work for what it truly is. For the next decade, William and Edmund continued to live in the house together, though William's diary suggests they rarely spoke. Edmund remained primarily in the chamber or the library, while William managed what remained of the family's business affairs. According to county records, the Litchfield fortune diminished steadily during this period, as neither brother showed much interest in maintaining the merchant enterprises that had built their wealth. In 1883, William Litchfield left the house for good. His diary's final entry, dated April 30th of that year, reads, "I can bear it no longer. Last night I woke to find Edmund standing over my bed, his eyes vacant, his mouth moving without sound. When I called his name, he did not respond, but a voice, Father's voice, came from somewhere behind him, saying only, 'Soon, William, soon you will understand. I am leaving at first light. Edmund may keep the house and its occupants, both seen and unseen. I want no part of it any longer. May God forgive us for what we have done here.'" County records confirm that William relocated to Indianapolis, where he lived quietly as a bookkeeper until his death from influenza in 1895. He never married and left no descendants. His body was returned to Ohio at the request of his brother, though no record exists of where he was ultimately buried. Edmund Litchfield remained the sole occupant of the family home for the next 20 years. According to the sparse accounts from this period, he became increasingly reclusive. Deliveries were left at the edge of the property, money placed under rocks for collection. The rare glimpses locals caught of him described a gaunt, pale figure who moved with unnatural stiffness and whose lips seemed to be in constant motion, as if engaged in endless conversation with unseen companions. The final chapter of the Litchfield saga came in 1901, when Edmund simply vanished. No one reported seeing him leave. No evidence suggested foul play. The house stood empty, its doors locked from the inside, Edmund's personal belongings exactly where he had left them, including a cup of tea on the library table, apparently abandoned mid-sip. For 2 years, the property remained in limbo, with distant relatives showing no interest in claiming it. Finally, in 1903, the county seized the estate for unpaid taxes, leading to the auction, where Professor Hargrove entered the story. Hargrove's investigation went far beyond the discovery of William's diary. For 8 years, he meticulously tracked down every available record related to the Litchfield family, interviewing elderly locals who remembered them, corresponding with archives in Massachusetts to uncover Jeremiah's early history, and, most significantly, conducting a thorough examination of the house itself. The structure defies conventional architectural logic, Hargrove noted in his research papers. The dimensions of the rooms do not add up to the external measurements of the house, suggesting spaces that exist between walls, or perhaps rooms that are somehow larger on the inside than they appear from without. Most troubling is the acoustics of the building. Words spoken in certain corners seem to carry to distant parts of the house, while shouts from other locations go unheard just feet away. It is as if the house itself is listening, deciding what sounds to carry and which to absorb. During his occupation of the property, Hargrove reported a number of disturbing incidents. His notes describe objects that moved between visits to rooms, doors that closed themselves against the wind, and most persistently, the sensation of being watched from empty corners. In winter, certain rooms refused to warm despite roaring fires, while in summer, the chamber remained unnaturally cool without explanation. "I have begun to hear them," reads a troubling entry from Hargrove's journal dated October 1907. "Not clearly at first, just whispers at the edge of sleep, but they grow stronger. A child's laughter, a woman humming, an old man clearing his throat. Last night I distinctly heard a voice call my name from the third-floor hallway, though I was alone in the house. I am both terrified and exhilarated. If what I suspect is true, the Litchfields discovered something beyond our current scientific understanding, something that defies natural law. The question that keeps me awake is whether their discovery was a miracle of consciousness preservation or whether they merely opened a door that should have remained forever closed." The most significant breakthrough in Hargrove's research came in 1909 when he discovered a hidden door in the library. Behind a bookcase that appeared to be built into the wall, he found a narrow staircase leading down to a previously unknown subcellar. There, in a room lined with lead sheeting, he discovered what he called the workshop, the place where Jeremiah Litchfield had apparently prepared his vessels. The shelves contained dozens of objects, Hargrove wrote, each one meticulously crafted to resemble something mundane, yet altered in subtle ways that provoke instinctive discomfort. Dolls with joints that bend in impossible directions. Music boxes designed to play notes that clash in painful discord. Mirrors ground to reflect not what stands before them, but something just slightly to the left or right. Most disturbing are the small figurines carved from bone, human bone, judging by their size and composition. Each bears the initials of a family member, TL, ML, AL, JL. Only William appears to have escaped commemoration in this grotesque collection. Among the papers found in this hidden room was a leather-bound manuscript titled simply The Method. Written in Jeremiah's hand, it detailed the specific rituals believed necessary for continuation. Hargrove's notes on this document are deliberately vague, as he claimed that some knowledge is too dangerous to preserve, even in the name of academic thoroughness. He did, however, note that the rituals involved the extraction of what Jeremiah called the essential self at the moment of death, binding it to a prepared object through means that Hargrove described only as reprehensible and requiring terrible sacrifice. Most chilling was Hargrove's discovery of evidence suggesting that Jeremiah's experiments had actually yielded results, though not the ones he had intended. The professor found daily logs kept by Edmund after his father's death, documenting what he called manifestations throughout the house. "They speak more clearly now," Edmund wrote in an entry from 1875. "Father's voice comes through the walls themselves, as he promised. Mother whispers through the garden soil. Thomas runs along the hallways at night, his footsteps light but distinct. Abigail sings from the attic, though her voice has changed, deeper somehow, and with words I do not recognize. They are changing in ways Father did not anticipate, becoming less themselves and more something else, something older, something that may have been waiting for us to open the door. Hargrove's investigation culminated in 1911 when he presented his findings to the College Board in what he hoped would establish the Litchfield phenomenon as a legitimate field of parapsychological research. Instead, his presentation was met with shock and academic censure. The board immediately dismissed him from his position, citing mental instability and dangerous fixation on superstitious matters unbecoming of scholarly pursuit. Before leaving the college, Hargrove reportedly told the board chairman, "You may dismiss me, but you cannot dismiss what waits in that house. I have seen too much, heard too much. The Litchfields found something, or perhaps something found them. Either way, it remains there still, growing stronger with each passing year." Following his dismissal, Hargrove's whereabouts became difficult to track. County records show he sold the Litchfield property to the county itself in July 1911, stipulating in the contract that the house should be demolished and the land left vacant. The county agreed to these terms, scheduling demolition for September of that year. Before demolition could begin, however, a fire of unknown origin consumed the house on the night of August 27, 1911. By the time the local fire brigade arrived, the structure was already beyond saving. Curiously, despite the wooden construction of the house and the dry summer conditions, the fire did not spread to any of the surrounding trees or outbuildings. As one firefighter reportedly remarked, it burned like it knew exactly what it was supposed to destroy. In the aftermath of the fire, county workers clearing the site made a disturbing discovery. Beneath where the chamber had stood, they found a small metal box that had somehow survived the blaze. According to the work foreman's report, the box was sealed with wax and bound with copper wire in an intricate pattern. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing what appeared to be a suicide note from Professor Hargrove. "By the time this is found, I will have joined the Litchfields," the note read, "not by choice, but by necessity. What began with them must end with me. I have destroyed their research, erased their methods, and now I will ensure that what they awakened has no vessel through which to spread. The fire that consumes this house tonight is my final act as a free man. By morning I will be elsewhere. Do not search for me. Do not rebuild here. Do not disturb the ground where the house once stood. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again, but they can be guarded." No record of Thomas Hargrove appears in any census or public document after 1911. No death certificate was ever filed. No grave bears his name. For all official purposes, the professor simply ceased to exist after the night of the fire. The county honored the prohibition against rebuilding on the property, converting the land into what is now known as Litchfield Memorial Park. A small plaque acknowledges the historic significance of the site, though it mentions only that a prominent merchant family once lived there, with no reference to the disturbing legacy revealed through Hargrove's research. For nearly 3 decades, the story of the Litchfields remained buried in scattered records and fading memories. Inside was a metal box identical to the one found at the Litchfield property, containing what appeared to be Professor Hargrove's complete research notes, along with a sealed envelope marked to be opened only in the event of recurring manifestations at the former Litchfield property. The college administrator who received these materials reportedly read through them once before locking them away in the institution's restricted archives, with instructions that they should remain sealed. For 50 years? Then, in 1937, during renovations of the regional college's library, a maintenance worker discovered a hidden compartment behind a loose brick in the basement wall. Those instructions were honored until 1987, when the collection was finally cataloged and made available to academic researchers, though access remained limited to those with specific credentials in historical research. It was through these archives that the full scope of the Litchfield story first came to light in academic circles, though mainstream historical accounts of Greene County continued to mention the family only in passing, noting their contributions to local commerce while omitting the darker aspects of their legacy. Perhaps most disturbing are the reports that have emerged from Litchfield Memorial Park over the decades since the house's destruction. Groundskeepers have documented unusual phenomena, areas where grass refuses to grow, forming perfect circles on the ground, wildlife that avoids certain sections of the park, particularly the spot where the chamber once stood, and multiple accounts of visitors who report hearing whispers when no one is present. In 1962, a caretaker named Robert Miller documented his experiences in a journal that was later donated to the County Historical Society. "Something isn't right about the north corner of the park," he wrote. "The air feels heavy there, like just before a storm, but the feeling never passes. I've found strange arrangements of twigs and stones in that area, always in circular patterns, though I clear them away each morning. Most troubling are the sounds. A child's laughter just at dusk, a woman humming early in the morning, and sometimes, when I'm closing the park at night, what sounds like someone whispering my name from just behind my shoulder." Miller worked at the park for 6 years before requesting a transfer to another county position. In his final report, he wrote simply, "I cannot shake the feeling that I am being watched by something that remembers this place differently than we do, something that considers it still home." Visitors to the park have reported similar experiences over the years, though most dismiss them as imagination, fueled by the property's atmospheric setting. Local teenagers occasionally use the park for ghost stories, perpetuating watered-down versions of the Litchfield legend without knowledge of the true historical record. Perhaps most significant is what happened in 1975, when the county briefly considered selling a portion of the park to a developer planning to build a community center. During the initial survey, workers drilling soil samples reported equipment malfunctions whenever they approached the area where the house had stood. More troubling were the sounds that apparently emanated from the drill holes, what one worker described as like someone screaming from very far away, or perhaps from behind a very thick wall. The project was ultimately abandoned, with the official reason cited as unsuitable soil composition. Unofficially, the survey team refused to return to the site, with the lead engineer noting in his private correspondence that some places reject human presence. This is one of them. In 1989, a graduate student researching local history became interested in the Litchfield case after discovering Hargrove's archives. Catherine Reynolds spent 3 months conducting research, including several overnight observations at the park. Her thesis, titled Psychological Projection and Local Folklore, The Litchfield Legacy, suggested that the family had likely suffered from a shared psychological condition that modern medicine might diagnose as a folie à famille, a shared delusional disorder. Reynolds proposed that Jeremiah Litchfield, suffering from delusions after the death of his youngest son, had induced similar psychological states in his remaining family members. She suggested that Professor Hargrove, already predisposed to belief in the paranormal, had fallen victim to the power of suggestion after reading the family's documents, essentially continuing their shared delusion decades later. Her rational explanation might have brought academic closure to the Litchfield story, except for what happened during her final visit to the site. According to the police report filed on October 17, 1989, Reynolds had gone to the park to take final photographs for her thesis. When she failed to return that evening, a search was initiated, eventually locating her at dawn, sitting beneath a large oak tree at the center of the park, precisely where the chamber had once stood. Reynolds appeared physically unharmed, but was described as catatonic and unresponsive to external stimuli. She was admitted to the regional hospital's psychiatric ward, where she remained for 3 weeks, before suddenly recovering with no memory of what had occurred in the park or what she had experienced during her catatonic state. Upon her release, Reynolds abandoned her thesis, withdrew from the graduate program, and reportedly moved to Washington State, refusing all further contact regarding her research. Her last communication on the matter was a brief note to her former academic advisor. Some questions shouldn't be answered, some doors shouldn't be approached, let alone opened. What I found beneath academic curiosity was a darkness that waits still. The story of the Litchfield family might have faded into obscurity after Reynolds's abandonment of her research, relegated to local legend and occasional whispered tales. However, in 1993, an unexpected discovery brought renewed attention to the case. During expansion of the county records office, workers uncovered a previously unknown storage room that contained several boxes of documents dating back to the mid-19th century. Among these was a sealed envelope marked simply Litchfield Investigation, Sheriff's Records, 1861-1871. The envelope contained what appeared to be unofficial notes kept by Sheriff Thomas Blackwood during his tenure in Greene County. While no formal investigation of the Litchfield family had ever been recorded in public documents, Blackwood's private observations suggested he had maintained a discreet surveillance of the property for nearly a decade. Received another complaint about sounds from the Litchfield property, reads an entry from December 1861. Third such report this month. Mrs. Ellison claims to have heard inhuman wailing while passing on the road after dusk. When questioned as to why she was out at such an hour, she became evasive. I suspect local superstition is fueling these reports, though I cannot deny the house has an unwholesome aspect about it. Blackwood's notes become increasingly concerned over the following years. By 1865, after the death of Abigail Litchfield, his writings suggest he had begun to take the reports more seriously. Observed the property from the southern ridge for 3 hours last evening, he wrote in June 1865. No movement visible within the house, though lights burned in the top-floor window, until well past midnight. The troubling matter was the shadow I glimpsed passing repeatedly before the light, too tall to be any of the Litchfields, and moving with a stiffness that suggested something not quite. I hesitate to commit my full thoughts to paper, even in these private notes. Most significant was an entry dated October 1870, which documented the sheriff's only direct interaction with Jeremiah Litchfield regarding official matters. Called at the Litchfield property today regarding reports of a drifter who was seen entering the grounds but never observed leaving. Jeremiah received me in the yard, refusing entry to the house itself. When questioned about the missing person, he became agitated, insisting no visitors had been to the property. As we spoke, I noticed what appeared to be fresh dirt on his boots and beneath his fingernails, though there was no evidence of recent gardening in the yard. Before departing, I heard what sounded like thumping from beneath the house, as if someone were striking the floor from the cellar below. When I remarked on it, Jeremiah attributed the noise to settling foundations and abruptly ended our conversation. Blackwood apparently considered launching a formal investigation, but ultimately decided against it, citing insufficient evidence and the Litchfields' standing in the community. His final note on the matter, written shortly after Jeremiah's death, suggests a deep regret. "I have failed in my duty," he wrote. "Fear of scandal and deference to the family's reputation prevented me from investigating what my instincts told me was happening in that house. Whatever Litchfield was doing, I allowed it to continue through my inaction. I can only pray that his secrets died with him, though the peculiar behavior of his sons suggests otherwise." These newly discovered documents provided additional context to Hargrove's research, confirming that concerns about the Litchfield family had existed even among local authorities, despite the absence of official action. More importantly, they suggested that the disappearances Hargrove had documented through William's diary, the subjects brought to the house for Jeremiah's experiments, had not gone entirely unnoticed. While the sheriff's notes created a brief resurgence of interest in the Litchfield case, by 1995, the story had once again receded from public attention. The land where the house once stood remained a public park, occasionally visited by curious locals or passing tourists who had heard vague rumors about its history. Then, in the spring of 1997, a groundskeeper discovered something unusual while planting new saplings in the park. Approximately 20 yards from where the Litchfield house had stood, his shovel struck what he initially believed to be a tree root. Further digging revealed a small metal box, similar to those described in Hargrove's research, one of the vessels Jeremiah Litchfield had apparently created for his experiments in consciousness preservation. According to the groundskeeper's statement, the box was sealed with wax and bound with copper wire in patterns that made the eyes hurt to follow. Against explicit instructions from county officials, he opened the box, claiming later that he had felt compelled to do so, as if it wanted to be found. Inside was a small porcelain doll, roughly the size of a man's hand, crafted to resemble a young boy. The doll's features were simplistic but disturbing: eyes that seemed slightly too large, a mouth frozen in what could be interpreted as either a smile or a grimace. Accompanying the doll was a yellowed paper tag bearing only the initials T.L., Thomas Litchfield, the youngest son and first of the family to die. The groundskeeper reportedly took the doll home, telling no one of his discovery. 3 weeks later, he was admitted to the regional hospital, suffering from severe insomnia and auditory hallucinations. According to his medical records, he repeatedly complained of hearing a child's voice calling to him from empty rooms and of footsteps following him whenever he was alone. During his second week of hospitalization, he confessed to his discovery and the location of the doll, which he had hidden in his apartment. When county officials retrieved the object, they found it sitting upright on a shelf, surrounded by small toys and candies, offerings the groundskeeper later admitted that he had felt obligated to provide, though he could not explain why. The doll was eventually transferred to the County Historical Society, where it was stored in a secure archive. The curator who received it noted in her records that the porcelain felt unusually warm to the touch, as if recently held, though no one had handled it for hours. More disturbing was her observation that the doll's position would sometimes change between viewings, despite being kept in a locked display case to which only she had the key. After 3 months in the archive, during which 4 separate employees reported hearing childlike humming when alone in the storage room, the curator made the decision to return the doll to its original container and rebury it where it had been found. No record of this decision was officially filed. The curator simply noted in her private journal that some artifacts are not meant to be preserved. The groundskeeper recovered shortly after the doll was removed from circulation, though he refused to ever enter Litchfield Memorial Park again, eventually relocating to another state. When interviewed years later for a local history project, he would say only, "That thing wasn't a doll, it was a cage. And whatever was inside it is still there, waiting." The Litchfield property remained quiet for nearly a decade after this incident. Then, in the autumn of 2006, a visiting professor of anthropology named Dr. Ellen Marsh became interested in the site while researching a book on family structures in 19th century America. Having discovered references to Hargrove's research, she obtained permission to conduct ground-penetrating radar surveys of the park, hoping to locate the family cemetery plot and any remaining foundations of the house. The survey revealed something unexpected. Beneath where the house had once stood, approximately 15 feet below the surface, was a large circular chamber that did not appear on any of the original architectural plans. This space, roughly 20 feet in diameter, showed no obvious entrance or exit points, as if it had been constructed as a sealed vault. Dr. Marsh applied for permission to excavate the site, citing its potential historical significance. The county initially approved her request, but 3 days before excavation was scheduled to begin, the permission was abruptly revoked without explanation. Unofficial comments from a county board member suggested that several officials had experienced troubling dreams after approving the project, dreams of standing in a circular room while something whispered to them from the walls. Frustrated by the sudden roadblock to her research, Dr. Marsh allegedly conducted an unauthorized examination of the site one night in October 2006. Using portable equipment, she drilled a small core sample from the area where her radar had detected the underground chamber, according to the report she later filed with her department. Before the university suppressed it, she extracted a 6-foot core of soil, followed by a substance she initially believed to be concrete, but which laboratory analysis identified as compressed bone ash mixed with an unidentifiable organic compound. Most disturbing was what happened when the core penetrated the chamber itself. According to Dr. Marsh's report, a sudden rush of air escaped from the small hole, air that she described as fetid and unnaturally cold, carrying with it a sound that could only be described as multiple voices whispering in unison. Equipment placed near the hole recorded a sustained temperature drop of nearly 20 degrees in the surrounding air, lasting for approximately 3 minutes before gradually returning to normal. Dr. Marsh sealed the hole immediately with a concrete plug, later writing that she had been overcome with an instinctive certainty that whatever was in that chamber should remain contained. She abandoned her research shortly thereafter, accepting a position at a university on the West Coast and refusing all further inquiries about the Litchfield property. The county responded to this unauthorized investigation by installing a decorative concrete plaza over the area where the house had stood, effectively sealing access to whatever lay beneath. The official explanation cited concerns about soil stability and potential sinkholes, though internal memos, later obtained through public records requests, referred to the need for a permanent barrier for reasons of public safety and historical containment. This brings us to what might be considered the final chapter of the documented Litchfield legacy. In the autumn of 1910, nearly a year before the fire that destroyed the house, a local photographer named Samuel Wells was commissioned by the County Historical Society to document architecturally significant homes in the area. The Litchfield property, despite its state of disrepair, was included in this project. Wells spent a single afternoon photographing the exterior of the house, reportedly refusing to enter despite Professor Hargrove's invitation. The photographer's daybook, discovered among his effects after his death in 1926, contained a brief but troubling note about the assignment. Completed exterior documentation of the Litchfield home today. Declined interior work despite additional payment offered. The house resists photography in a manner I cannot explain. Shadows fall where no object casts them. Lights appear in windows I know to be empty. Most disturbing was the top floor window, the large one facing south. Though I saw nothing through my lens while working, the developed plate shows what appears to be faces pressed against the glass. At least 3 distinct visages, though Hargrove insisted he was alone in the house during my visit. I will include the exterior shots in my delivery to the Historical Society, but will destroy the negatives showing the window. Some images should not be preserved. The photographs Wells submitted to the Historical Society remained in their archives until the 1960s, when most were transferred to the county library's local history collection. One image, however, was apparently held back, the photograph showing the south-facing window of the 3rd floor where the chamber was located. This withheld photograph surfaced unexpectedly in 2010 when a renovation of the Historical Society's original building uncovered a sealed envelope hidden within a wall cavity. Inside was the missing photograph, accompanied by a note from the Society's director in 1910. This photograph is not to be catalogued or displayed. I have examined it carefully and consulted with Professor Hargrove regarding its content. We are in agreement that what it depicts is not a trick of light or a flaw in the plate, but rather evidence of something that should not exist. I preserve it here only as documentation that some boundaries between worlds are thinner than we care to admit. May God have mercy on the souls of the Litchfield family, if indeed their souls remain their own. The photograph itself shows the exterior of the Litchfield house from the south angle. The structure appears much as described in historical accounts, a three-story Victorian with steep gables and a wraparound porch. Most of the windows are dark, save for the large window on the third floor. There, clearly visible despite the graininess of early photography, are what appear to be three faces pressed against the glass. Examination by modern photographic experts has confirmed that the image shows no signs of manipulation or double exposure common to photography of the era. The faces, while blurred, display distinct characteristics. An elderly man with a long beard, presumably Jeremiah, a middle-aged woman with her hair pulled severely back, possibly Margaret, and most disturbingly, what appears to be a young boy, his features distorted in what could be either a smile or a silent scream. The photograph was briefly displayed in the County Museum in 2011 before being removed following complaints from visitors who reported feeling physically ill while viewing it. Some described experiencing auditory hallucinations after leaving the exhibit, the sound of whispering voices that seemed to follow them home, only to disappear when directly addressed. Today, Litchfield Memorial Park remains a quiet corner of Greene County. The concrete plaza installed over the site of the house has weathered over the years, developing cracks that county maintenance repeatedly repairs. Local residents occasionally report unusual phenomena, cold spots that persist even in summer heat, the sound of footsteps when no one is visible, and most commonly, the sense of being watched by unseen eyes. Perhaps most telling is the behavior of children in the park. Parents have noted for decades that young children often refuse to play near the plaza, claiming that the people underground don't like noise. Others report their children engaging in conversations with invisible playmates who reportedly tell them secrets about the special room where everyone stays together forever. The County Historical Society maintains a small exhibit on the Litchfield family, focusing primarily on their contributions to local commerce in the 19th century. A single paragraph mentions Professor Hargrove's research, describing it only as unconventional theories about the family's private practices. The photograph of the house, the metal boxes, and William's diary are stored in the Society's restricted archives, available only to credentialed researchers who must sign a waiver acknowledging the potentially disturbing nature of the materials. As for the underground chamber detected by Dr. Marsh's survey, it remains sealed beneath layers of concrete and soil, undisturbed and uninvestigated. County records show that ground-penetrating radar is now routinely used to monitor the site, though the purpose of this monitoring is not specified in public documents. Local legend holds that on certain nights, particularly in October, near the anniversary of Thomas Litchfield's death, visitors to the park after dusk might hear the sound of a child's laughter drifting from the plaza, followed by whispers that seem to come from just behind one's shoulder. Those who have experienced this phenomenon universally report the same message, delivered in a voice that sounds like many people speaking together. The door is still open. We are still here. We are always here. What truly happened in the Litchfield house may never be fully understood. Was Jeremiah Litchfield a grieving father driven to madness by the loss of his son, imposing his delusions on a family already isolated from normal society? Was Professor Hargrove an academic whose obsession with the supernatural led him to project meaning onto coincidence and tragedy? Or did the Litchfields indeed discover something beyond conventional understanding, a method of preserving consciousness beyond death, but at a terrible cost? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the weathered pages of William's diary, in the sealed chamber beneath the park, or in the faces that still seem to watch from a window that no longer exists. What remains certain is that the legacy of the Litchfield family continues to cast a long shadow over Greene County, a shadow that, like the family itself, refuses to truly die. Some doors, once opened, can never be completely closed again.